When most people think of royal power, they picture crowns. Imagine a narrow stretch of water, only 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Now imagine that nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through that tiny corridor every single day. If this passage were blocked, even for a few days, the global economy could tremble, oil prices could skyrocket, and tensions between powerful nations could spiral into crisis. Welcome to the Strait of Hormuz, a place so strategically important that world superpowers constantly watch it, protect it, and sometimes even threaten to shut it down. But why is this small waterway so powerful? And what would actually happen if it ever closed? Let's break it down. The strait that connects the world's energy. The Strait of Hormuz lies between Iran to the north and Oman, and the United Arab Emirates to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, which then opens into the Arabian Sea and the wider Indian Ocean. On a map, it looks like a small gap between two landmasses, but in reality, it is one of the most important energy choke points on Earth. A choke point is a narrow route that ships must pass through. If that route is blocked, global trade can be severely disrupted. And Hormuz is the most critical oil choke point in the world. Every day, around 20 million barrels of oil travel through this passage. That's roughly 20% of the world's total petroleum consumption. Major oil-producing countries in the Persian Gulf rely on this route to export their energy to the rest of the world. These include Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Iran. Most of their oil must pass through Hormuz to reach markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. Without this passage, moving that oil becomes extremely difficult. Why the strait is so narrow. Even though the Strait of Hormuz is about 33 kilometers wide, ships cannot use all of that space. For safety and navigation reasons, the shipping lanes are extremely narrow. There are two main lanes, one 3-kilometer lane for ships entering the Persian Gulf, one 3-kilometer lane for ships leaving the Gulf. Between them is a 2-kilometer buffer zone. That means massive oil tankers carrying millions of barrels must pass through a corridor only a few kilometers wide. It's like forcing the world's energy traffic through a tiny highway in the middle of the sea. Why the world depends on this route. Many of the largest oil consumers on Earth depend heavily on the oil flowing through Hormuz. For example, China, India, Japan, South Korea. These Asian economies import massive amounts of energy from the Persian Gulf. Japan alone once imported over 80% of its oil through this strait. China, now the world's largest oil importer, also depends heavily on shipments that pass through this route. If the Strait of Hormuz were disrupted, these countries would face immediate energy shortages. And because oil prices are global, the shock would spread quickly across the world economy. The strait and global oil prices. Oil markets react quickly to any threat in the Strait of Hormuz. Even rumors of conflict can cause oil prices to spike. Why? Because traders know that if the route is blocked, global oil supply could suddenly shrink. Less supply usually means higher prices. Experts estimate that if the Strait of Hormuz were closed completely, oil prices could surge dramatically, possibly reaching over $150 or even $200 per barrel. That would increase fuel prices worldwide, affecting everything from transportation to food production. Air travel, shipping, and manufacturing would all become more expensive. In short, a disruption here could trigger a global economic shock. Why the strait is so politically sensitive. The Strait of Hormuz sits in one of the most politically tense regions in the world. Iran controls the northern coastline, while the southern side belongs to Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Because of its geographic position, Iran has significant influence over the strait. Over the years, Iranian leaders have occasionally threatened to close the strait during conflicts with Western countries. Such threats usually come during periods of intense political tension, especially involving sanctions, military confrontations, or nuclear disputes. However, actually closing the strait would be extremely difficult. Why? Because it would likely trigger a massive international response. The military presence in the strait. Given its importance, The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most heavily monitored waterways on the planet. The United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, regularly patrols the region. Other countries also maintain naval forces nearby, including United Kingdom, France, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Their goal is to ensure that ships can pass through safely. In the past, the strait has seen several military incidents. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides attacked oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. More recently, there have been incidents involving seized oil tankers, drone attacks, naval confrontations. Each event raises global concerns because of the strait's critical importance. Could the strait actually be closed? Technically, yes, but only temporarily. Iran could attempt to disrupt shipping using naval mines, missiles, fast attack boats, drones. However, closing the strait completely would be extremely difficult to sustain. International naval forces would likely move quickly to reopen the route. Still, even short disruptions could have major consequences. For example, a few days of blockage could cause oil price spikes, shipping delays, market panic. This is why the world closely watches any tension in the region. Are there alternatives? Some countries have tried to reduce their dependence on the Strait of Hormuz by building pipelines. Saudi Arabia, for instance, operates pipelines that transport oil from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, allowing tankers to avoid Hormuz. The United Arab Emirates has also built a pipeline that bypasses the strait. But these alternatives cannot replace the full volume of oil that normally passes through Hormuz. That means the world still depends heavily on this narrow passage. The future of the strait. As the world transitions toward renewable energy, the importance of oil choke points may eventually decline. But for now, global economies still rely heavily on fossil fuels. And as long as oil remains a central part of the global energy system, the Strait of Hormuz will remain one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth. It is a place where geography, politics, and global economics intersect. A narrow strip of water that quietly carries millions of barrels of energy every day. The Strait of Hormuz may look small on a map, but its influence reaches across the entire planet. Every day, almost tankers carrying vast amounts of energy pass through this narrow corridor, fueling industries, powering cities, and supporting billions of people. If this route were ever seriously disrupted, the consequences would ripple through the global economy almost instantly. That's why governments, militaries, and markets constantly watch this tiny waterway. Because sometimes the most powerful places on Earth are not the biggest ones. Sometimes they're just 33 kilometers wide.